there's a pretty crazy statement on Daf 17 of Yevamot. And like a lot of crazy statements we see in the Talmud, they often have to be understood and given some context. So what is the statement? It says that the women of the 10 lost tribes were infertile. So first of all, if you don't know what the 10 lost tribes are, at a certain point after King David and King Solomon, the kingdom of Israel got split into two halves. The kingdom of Israel in the north, the kingdom of Yehuda in the south. And these were running as two separate kingdoms until the kingdom of Israel was invaded a couple hundred years later by the armies of Aram. And what they used to do is they used to take people from one nation that they conquered and move them and intermingle them with other nations because they felt that would stop them from rising up and revolting against them. So it was very common. They'd conquer a country, they'd move people all over the place so that they'd really kind of lose their national identity and would be less, potentially destructive. So here you have these 10 lost tribes, the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom, which always confused me because one of them, Shimon, should have been in the south. So I'm not always surprised why it's not 9 tribes and 3, why we say it's 10 and 2. Nonetheless, we have these 10 lost tribes. And right now we hear echoes that they might be, their descendants might have wound up at different places around the world. We have this idea of the Bnei Menashe, the children of Menashe, this group from India who claim they're from the tribe of Menashe. We have in Afghanistan those who claim to be these tribal peoples who actually say that they're the descendants of Ruvain, that they're a part of that tribe, and they got spread out to Afghanistan. And they still have this as a deep part of their tradition. Nonetheless, there's a big question. Are they Jewish? Are they really part of the Jewish nation? Or are they somebody who might, even if they are truly part of this tradition, if they are part of the tribes, maybe they're like, we have some genetic things in common, we have some history going back thousands of years, but we've diverged so long ago that we don't really consider ourselves part of the same nation any longer. Like, how do we interpret that? And there's very different opinions within the Jewish nation. But this opinion on Daf 17 of Yevamot, I think, was really, really fascinating. It was a clear statement that the women of these 10 lost tribes became infertile during this whole dispersion. That's a pretty crazy idea, right? You have a giant nation of people representing 10 different tribal groups, and all of the women become infertile at once? Is that meant to be taken literally? I read that and I wonder, because there is an idea in Judaism, we go by what's called matrilineal descent. We say that somebody's Jewish if their mother was Jewish. We don't traditionally say that the person is Jewish if their father only was Jewish. So what I think that they're actually saying in this verse, that all the women from these 10 lost tribes were infertile, not like scientifically that each and every woman was failed to have a child after the exile, though perhaps it was some miraculous thing that did that. I think they're going the other way. I think they're kind of saying that, we have lost contact with these people for so long. Even at the time of the Talmud, it was like 1,000 years or so that they had lost contact with those tribes. They are so far gone. Our histories are so divergent. We're considering them as if all of the women who went into exile were infertile, and any descendants that the men might have had from those tribes are not even going to be considered Jewish any longer. That they are part of a different nation now. They're on a different path with some shared national history, but so divergent that we're not really considering them part of the equation anymore of our community. So it's as if there was not a single person born from all those nations through the matrilineal line. Therefore, we don't have to consider them in the fold. We don't have to have this whole confusion. We have these big questions these days, who's a Jew, who's not a Jew, how many Jews are there in the world? Well, if you want to go back and think of every single Jewish woman and all the children, no matter how many generations ago she might have converted to Christianity or Islam, and you want to count all those people, when you come up with some huge, massive number, but most of them have completely lost contact with Judaism, have no identity of Judaism, and it becomes problematic to say thousands of years later that they're Jewish. So I think that's what this statement is saying. I think this statement is saying that, we are considering this group as if they were completely infertile, as if nobody remained who is really part of our nation. And therefore, we don't need to worry about that group. when considering our national story going forward, which raises all kinds of interesting questions now when groups like the B'nai Menashe and these people who trace themselves back to Reuven are starting to reappear.